The following program may contain coarse language, violence, nudity, mature subject matter, or scenes which may not be suitable for all viewers. Viewer discretion is advised.
All Hit Radio.
Welcome to the X Zone, a place where fact is fiction and fiction is reality. Now, here's your host, Rob McConnell.
And it is, it is Wednesday, May the 10th, in the year 2023. My name is Rob McConnell. Welcome back, everyone. I hope you had a great past 24 hours since you and I have had the opportunity of sitting down and chatting with each other. We're coming to you tonight on the Talkstar Radio Network, Mutual Broadcast Network, X-Zone Broadcast Network, and Channel 34 on SimulTV at simultv.com. If you'd like to send me an email, xzone at xzoneradiotv.com, on all social media sites, X-Zone Radio TV. And let me see, there's no housework to be done for change, except to say hello to my producer way up in the master control here in our studios in St. Catharines, the one and only Craig West. Craig, nice working with you, as it has been for these past, 27 years? Yeah, wow. What a show we have for you tonight. My first guest tonight is Matthew Alper, and he is all the way in Brooklyn, New York. We're going to be talking about Matthew's book entitled The God Part of the Brain, a Scientific Interpretation of Human Spirituality. His website is godpart.com. And Matthew, welcome to the X-Zone. Great seeing you. How are things in Brooklyn tonight?
Peachy. Whoop, I'm leaving the camera.
Oh, gosh.
Things are peachy here in Brooklyn.
Excellent. Matthew, tell our audience a little bit about yourself.
Well, I'm a native Brooklynite, partially schooled in London. I've had various careers. I started as a teacher, 5th grade, then high school history. Ended up living in Germany after selling a screenplay to a German film company. Came back to New York, wrote what I consider my magnum opus, The God Part of the Brain, a scientific interpretation of human spirituality. It was the culmination of a life quest I'd been on since I was a child. And and then the book took off, and that became sort of a lot of my life and career.
Matthew, in your opinion, how has spirituality affected the way that people think over the years? Has there been a change as far as you can see, the way that people look at spirituality compared to what spirituality used to mean?
I think spirituality means the same thing as it did even back to ancient times for cultures that focused more on the spiritual, more the Eastern philosophies and religions. I think that humans are as spiritual and as religious as they've ever been. I think it's a constant in human nature, which is part of what I write about, the human nature underlying our religiosity and tendency to be spiritual. I would say there might be a slight change in our religiosity. I think with the advent of science, it's becoming harder for certain secular cultures or people in secular cultures to embrace these various mythologies. So people, I think, are veering more. Like, I live in New York City.
Right.
This is not a very religious town. Like, I take drives into Middle America, and there's crosses all over and billboards about, abortion and whatnot. You don't get that here. It's mostly a secular society. However, I would still say a good portion of people, most people, at this point, refer to themselves as spiritual but not religious.
I saw a survey the other day where the number of people who are going with traditional religious philosophies are on the decline, and the people who are going towards alternative religious philosophies are in the increase. For example, paganism, Wicca, and others. Is this part of the trend that you're seeing?
I mean, I don't see that here, paganism and Wiccanism. I mean, it's more people in New York City
Mhm.
refer to themselves as spiritual but not religious.
Gotcha.
And by
Do you-
spirit, and when they say spiritual, I
Mhm.
think they mean sort of, look, people are into yoga and meditation. They're
Sure.
embracing these various Eastern philosophies that refer to themselves as spiritual but not religious, not necessarily entrenched in dogma and ritual, but more like an awareness of the world and people and kindness. And, that's what at least it's meant to be. Does it make them any more kind or humanistic? Not necessarily, but that's the
Right.
philosophy.
Do you think in the year 2023 that we actually need God?
I think that, we're going to need God, gods,
Mhm.
various beliefs, different forms of what I refer to as magical thinking till the end. Basically the premise of what I write about, the God part of the brain, is I'm suggesting that it's an inherent part of our wiring. That basically there's a principle in evolutionary biology that says that any behavior that's universal to a species is an
Mhm.
inherited instinct. So, for instance, it's not an accident that all dogs bark and cats meow and beavers build dams. These are instincts that are passed onto the animal. It's an inherited instinct. And since all behavior is generated from the brain, that means that, for instance, in the case of cats, somewhere in all cats' brains, there's a specific region that we could call the meow part of its brain. I'm suggesting the same holds true for humanity, that the fact that every human culture has believed in a spiritual realm and created a religion around those beliefs is an indication that it's an inherent part of human nature, as in genetically inherited. Like there are parts of our brain that are compelling us to
Mhm.
see reality through a spiritual lens, to believe that it's not just the physical universe, but that there are other things involved. So we have this sort of, it's a comforting mechanism. It's a coping mechanism. So even though we know that our bodies are going to die and perish, we have this built-in sensibility, this comforting sensibility that our spirits will persevere past physical death. So physical death is just sort of like a passing stage. So, so that's what I'm writing. I'm writing, therefore, it's an inherent part of human nature. So it's not going to go away ever. We will always, the majority of humans are always going to have some form of a belief system. Now, even though I call it the God part of the brain, in the book, I make clear that I'm talking God as a metaphor for all things that I refer to again as magical thinking. And that includes superstition, belief in the supernatural. Every culture has believed in good luck and bad luck.
Right. Yeah.
Every culture has believed in ghosts and apparitions and the perseverance of our spirits in some form. Um, so it's the paranormal, the supernatural. I've even extended it to like conspiratorial thinking. I think a lot of conspiratorial thinking is rooted in the need to embrace a belief system that's based in faith more than reason.
Could it be that we, as a human species, needed something like God in order to try and understand what life is all about, as well as being a comforting factor, as you pointed out?
Sure. I mean, that's more on the sociological end. It has provided us, it's, how we've come up with solutions to the
Mhm.
problems we've had. Certainly most religions were created in the before pre-science, pre-Renaissance. So when there was lightning, when it rained, we didn't know about condensation and evaporation and water molecules. So we assumed, the gods are crying or
Right.
whatever they're doing. So yeah, it provided us with explanations, but I believe that the factor that drove the evolution of parts of our brain that compel us to see reality this way, that was the terror of death, existential anxiety. Being the first and only species to be aware of our own mortalities was so overwhelming the anxiety created by our awareness of death, the horror of knowing we're going to lose everyone we've ever known or loved, including ourselves, force the selection of the mechanics of our brain so that we have this comforting device that allows us to feel that there's a spiritual world out there too, and that therefore we're part spiritual as well. We're part based in spirit.
And therefore we never die. It's a way of looking at immortality, I would imagine.
That's right. It provides us with a belief system to believe that we have immortal souls.
Matthew, what initially compelled you to write a God part of the brain and a scientific interpretation of human spirituality?
So, as I'm discussing that, I believe that it was our awareness of death that drove the mechanics of the evolution of the mechanics of these parts of our brain. It was the pivotal factor that put me on this quest. I think pretty much since, I don't know, maybe when I was 5, I was lying in my bed with my cat, petting my cat, and for whatever reason, suddenly it dawned on me, I think after having flushed enough goldfish down the toilet, I made the connection that, oh crap, it's going to happen to my cat too.
Right.
And then it all of a sudden, like a light bulb went off, and it was like, oh no, and me, And I picked up the cat and I went running into the kitchen where my mother was cleaning. And I said, the cat's name was Frisky. I'm like, Frisky's going to die. And my mom's like, why? What happened? And I'm like, well, nothing, and she saw the cat run off. She's like, what are you talking about? Frisky's fine. And I was like, not now, but one day. Yeah. And I confronted her that, and it's going to happen to you and me too. Right. And she, gave me sort of and my parents aren't religious. I don't think she believed anything she was saying, but she was like, oh, well, we'll all be in heaven and it's going to be fine. So I didn't know. I was like, oh, okay, maybe, but as I got older, I continued to ask questions, and I found myself being more on the skeptical side. And I started studying a lot of science and a lot of philosophy. And as I got older, I began experimenting with psychedelic drugs. I was reading different authors like Carlos Castaneda, talking about making contact with the other side. Jim Morrison talking about breaking on through to the other side. So I believed, hey, if there's another side and all I have to do is pop some pills and I can go there, I'm curious. So I experimented with drugs, meditation. I studied world religions, world mythology. And I came to the conclusion that the only thing that was going to provide me with any verifiable answers was going to be one of the sciences. So I put myself to just reading as much science, physics, biology, you name it, cosmology, astronomy, thinking maybe somewhere out there, there's a clue that someone hasn't picked up on yet. Maybe it's out in the cosmos, maybe it's somewhere in the atoms, maybe it's in our cells. And eventually I came up with this one night I was just sitting at home, and the universality of human drive to create religion and believe in gods suddenly struck me, and I realized, oh my God, it's a universal. It's happening in every culture. And according to the laws of genetic science, that means it's wired into our brains. And that, for me, I wrote down on a piece of paper the God part of the brain, and took 3 years off and studied and researched and put the book together.
Matthew, please stand by. You and I have to take our first break. Exo Nation, our guest this hour is Matthew Alper. His website is godpart.com, and he's the author of The God Part of the Brain, a scientific interpretation of human spirituality. And we'll both be back on the other side of this break as the X Zone continues with yours truly, Rob McConnell, and my special guest this hour, Matthew Alper. Whatever you do, don't go away, and we'll see you in about, Craig, a minute, 40 seconds. And welcome back, everyone. Before we get back to our guest this hour, Matthew Alper, I'd just like to remind everyone that if you'd like free access to 50, that's 50, exclusive TV channels, 95 online video games, and thousands of on-demand movies, all for free, no strings attached. No, you don't have to buy anything. You don't have to sign up for anything. All you need to do is go to 50forfree.ca. That's 50, www.unconventional.ca. And just follow the very simple links. And Bob's your uncle. Guess you can call me Uncle Bob from now on. And this is with the compliments of the X Zone Radio TV show, the X Zone TV channel, and of course, our good friends and broadcast partners, Simul TV. Once again, that website is www.50forfree.ca. Matthew Alper is my guest. He is the author of The God Part of the Brain, a scientific interpretation of human spirituality, and his website is godpart.com. Matthew, can you explain the premise of the idea of a God part of the brain?
Right. So, well, as I was saying, so there's a principle in evolutionary biology that says that if there's a cognitive trait that's universal to a species, it means it's genetically inherited. So again, the fact that every human culture has language, which would suggest we're a linguistic animal. That doesn't come out of thin air, our capacity for language. It's because there are regions in our brain that enable us with that capacity. With the help of neuroscience, we know about the Wernicke's area, the Broca's area, the angular gyrus, parts of the brain specific to our linguistic intelligence. If you damage one of those parts, you'll suffer what's called a linguistic aphasia, some disability to your capacity to either comprehend or communicate language. So again, I applied that principle to the fact that every human culture has believed in gods and deities and spiritual realities and good luck and bad luck, etc., suggesting that's an inherent part of human nature. So I'm suggesting there are parts of our brain, and it's not that I'm suggesting it at this point. At this point, they've been putting people in various neural scans for years now and finding that regardless of what God you pray to, when you do pray or meditate, the same parts of the brain are lighting up. There are parts of our brain that are specific to enabling us to have these experiences. It's why, for instance, various cultures throughout human history have used certain plants to induce a religious experience because it's coming from the chemistry of the brain. It's not that we're making contact with some alternate outside transcendental realm, but the chemicals from the plants we're ingesting are compelling us to believe that we are making contact with another realm. So when I talk about the God part of the brain, I'm talking about those parts of the brain that are responsible for making us a religious animal and a spiritual animal.
But if humans are hardwired, Matthew, to believe in spirituality and spiritual reality, as well as a God, why are there atheists?
Okay, well, that would be chapter 10 of my book. So there's also a principle with evolutionary biology that says that for every trait we possess, we fall into a bell curve. So for instance, if we took a simple physical trait like height and we rounded up 1,000 people from any population and we measured their height, they would fall into a bell curve. Most people would be of what we would call average height. But on the tapering extremes, there would be like 10 to 15% of people who would be shorter than average and 10 to 15% of people who would be taller than average. You apply that to something like musicality. Humans are a musical animal. Most of us have what we would call average musical potential. If we're trained, we can learn an instrument. We can hum a song. We can sing along with a song. However, on the tapering extremes of that bell curve, some of us are born tone deaf. And on the other side, some of us are born musical savants. We're gifted musically. It's an innate thing. Kids who are 5 years old who hear Beethoven for the first time sit down at a piano and can play note for note in perfect time. So it's part of our wiring. So I'm suggesting if it's part of our wiring, the same bell curve will apply. Most humans have what we would call average spiritual potential, an average sensibility that there's something else out there, whether it's gods or UFOs or the paranormal, etc. All of these, I'm suggesting, are manifestations of these parts of the brain compelling us to see reality in a particular way. Some of us are wired with a deficiency. We're not particularly religious or spiritual. We don't have a lens that makes us perceive the world that way. Some of us are born hyper-religious. From 5 years old, they're standing at the pulpit delivering heartfelt, passionate sermons about their God, regardless of the religion. You'll have that in Judaism, Christianity, Islam, whatever the religion, there's going to be those people. So I'm suggesting that due to genetic variance, the same genetic variance that makes us all different individuals, it plays a role in the way we look at spirituality and religion.
So as a species, we need to believe in something.
Correct. I believe that as a species, awareness of death is just too debilitating for us to face reality, knowing that A, we're going to die, B, life has no real meaning or purpose. There's no greater being out there that we're connected to. We're just like, a momentary fart in the universe. We're here and gone, done for all eternity. That's a terrifying thought. Both that we're meaningless, B, that we're we're around for an infinitesimal point of time, and then we will cease to exist for all eternity. Now, I like what Mark Twain said on the matter. Someone asked him, because he was an atheist, don't you fear not existing for all eternity? And he said, well, I existed for all eternity before I was born. So, and that didn't seem to bother me.
How true.
Yeah.
How very true. What about near-death experiences?
Sure. Well, I write. I have a chapter, near-death experiences, in the book, and like every other aspect of religious belief, I approach it from a neurophysiological perspective, and I go into the research that's been done by the scientific community on what is happening when we have one. Now, first of all, it's another universal. People around the world, Asia, Africa, Australia, on every continent, people report having these types of experiences, meaning, again, it's probably an inherent part of our nature. Moreover, the symptoms are always the same: a white light, a feeling of a tunnel, a feeling of being connected, seeing their gods. Now, we have to realize when, let's say a fundamentalist Muslim in Saudi Arabia has a near-death experience, he's seeing Muhammad or Allah. When a Christian has one, they're seeing Jesus or Mary or, the Christian God, et cetera, et cetera. So is this to suggest that all the gods are real? Or is this to suggest then that we're all having a similar physiological experience that's prompting us to believe in our gods? Now, what the scientific community has found is that the key neurotransmitter behind near-death experiences is a neurotransmitter called glutamate. When the brain receives a diminished amount of oxygen, so let's say you get into an accident and you're bleeding out, or your heart stops, you have a heart attack, your brain's not getting normal amounts of oxygen, the brain starts to secrete glutamate, which does a few different things. One, it triggers the optic nerve flares up, so we see a white light. Two, it causes us to, it diminishes the blood flow to the amygdala where anxiety and fear is generated. So it calms us. If you have a heart attack or you're bleeding out, what does the body want to happen? You want the heart to slow down. You want to calm things down. You're pumping less blood out. So all of these are just physical symptoms to an experience that's essentially meant to comfort us and help us live when we're about to die. Now, people, for instance, who make claims like they died and came back, from a scientist's opinion, nobody dies and comes back. Now, the heart can stop. The heart's just an organ. The heart's just a pump. Boom, 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 boom. That's all it is. We can get an artificial heart. We can lose our regular organic heart and get a motor, keeps us alive. When the heart stops, nobody dies. Just your body's no longer pumping blood. When the brain dies, consciousness ceases. Now, some people are in comas. Their brains have died, but their bodies are alive. So they've lost consciousness. So they're not technically dead. So it's when a combination of the heart stops and the brain dies, the cells in the brain die, that we're officially dead. So, nobody's ever come back from the dead, for instance.
How do we explain these cases talking about near-death experiences where people claim that they've gone to the other side, they've stayed there for what they consider to be a significant amount of time, they've met with past loved ones, and they always get the message that, no, you can't stay here, you have to go back.
Right.
Is this something that the body does to try and subconsciously, or based on the hard wiring, as you describe it, that the body does to try and make sense of what's going on, or why it's had this diminishment of blood flow, or why the
Sure. So you kind of answered the question in your question, because you used a key word, claim.
Okay.
When people claim all sorts of things. People claim they walked into the desert and they spoke with God. 99.9% of the time they're considered crazy, sometimes put in an institution. The 0.001% of the time they birth a new religion and they're considered prophets. But claim is the key word. Whenever the scientific community has investigated these things, the same community that gave us the technology allowing you and me to speak through a computer right now.
Right.
When they've investigated these same phenomena, no one in the scientific community has ever come to the conclusion that, yes, people have died and come back. If the scientific community, after studying these things, came to that conclusion, we could go to college, we could go to any school on earth, and we could study, like, I don't know what they would call it, but sort of, death experience studies or whatever, but basically, no, we study biology. And according to biology, you're dead, you're dead. There's no coming back. So the key word is claim. Now, look, anyone can write a book and say, I interviewed 50 people and this is what they said. We don't even know if he interviewed 50 people. We just know someone might be trying to sell books.
Right, exactly.
Even if they were genuine and they did interview 50 people who said, this is the experience I had, as you said, though, that means he interviewed 50 people who claim to have an experience. I'm suggesting the nature of the experience is organic, that what they're experiencing, I don't believe they're lying, like those people are telling lies to get attention. They really feel they had that experience because the way the brain is wired,
right,
you're wired to feel that those experiences are real.
Matthew Alper is my very special guest this hour. He's the author of The God Part of the Brain, a scientific interpretation of human spirituality. His website is godpart.com, and we'll be back after this break at the bottom of the hour as the X Zone continues right here from the studios of REL-MAR McConnell Media Company in St. Catharines, Ontario, Canada. Don't go away. Matthew Alper is my special guest this hour, X Zone Nation. He's the author of The God Part of the Brain, a scientific interpretation of human spirituality. The website is godpart.com. Question for you, my friend. If we're all hardwired, why is it that some people believe in something? And for example, there are those who believe in UFOs, there are those who believe in ghosts, there are those who believe in a God, and others don't. If we're all hardwired, what differentiates one belief in one person compared to a non-belief in another?
Right. Well, kind of as I think I answered that earlier when I was talking about the bell curve.
Okay.
That some of us are more wired, just like some of us are wired to be more musical or less musical.
Gotcha.
So I think the same applies to that. Actually, I have a question for you.
Sure.
And in the beginning of the show, there was an advisory warning that, there could be cursing, nudity. So I'm like, am I entitled to strip down naked while we're on the show? Is that cool?
Well, actually, you put your shirt on to come on the show, so I appreciate.
I did. Well, the modest side of me said, "Hey, if we're going to go video, I'll put a shirt on." But then I saw the warning. It was like, "Hey, there might be nudity." I was like, "I didn't need to put a shirt on after all."
Strange things have happened over 35 years, my friend. Very strange things. So our insurance company for broadcast insurance asked us, "You want the policy? You've got to put the disclaimer in."
Okay.
And our lawyers said, "Do it."
Okay, makes sense. Have you ever had an instance of a guest start stripping down? I'm guessing no.
Yes.
You did. Okay.
Yes.
All right. Don't tempt me.
Yeah, she was called what Craig, who was it? That's right. Her name was Lila, and she listen to this, okay? And she was a psychic stripper. And as she was giving a psychic reading, she would take her clothes off.
All right. Well, I'm a stripper neuroscientist. So as I get into talking about different parts of the brain, with each part, I remove a different article of clothing.
Yeah, yes, but I don't think that you have a 44D.
I don't.
Lila did. Great seeing you. Thanks for joining us tonight, Matthew.
Sure.
Even though you don't believe in God,
right?
What is your take on such things as, I know I was going to say psychic strippers, but we'll put that one aside for now. But for example, extraterrestrials.
Okay, good question. So, I believe that to a certain extent, extraterrestrials do fall into the auspices of magical thinking, but it's different than gods. So do I believe personally that there's extraterrestrial life in the universe? I would say probability-wise, most likely yes. Do I believe that we've had contact or ever will? I would say most likely not. The universe is vast.
It is.
And there's a ring in the universe where it's kind of like the Goldilocks ring, where it's not too hot, it's not too cold, it's not too close to the center of the universe, where life can evolve. And it's a huge ring. So, for instance, the closest star to Earth is Alpha Centauri. Besides our sun, our star, the sun, the next closest star is Alpha Centauri, which I believe is like something like 4.4 light years away, which translates to about 26 trillion miles. Even if a species developed that had technology that could go like 1,000 times faster than anything we have, it would still take like 10,000 years to travel 26 trillion miles. So do I believe, which would, even if it was a species, for instance, that lived 10,000 years per generation, they would have to dedicate themselves to endless generations just to get here. Now, do I believe there's any species on Alpha Centauri that's made that trip, come down, burnt a circle in a cornfield, and said, "Let's go home now"? No. So do I believe that we've had visitations? I do not. I believe that, now again, I do believe there's life out there. Is there intelligent life? I would say probably. But I don't believe we'll ever have access to it. And I don't believe they'll ever have access to us. It's a nice thought. And it doesn't quite play because we're talking biology. If it existed, it would be a biological form. So we're not talking about deities. We're not talking about spiritual entities. So it's kind of like this gray zone. But I believe that the beliefs behind alien visitations is kindred to our God part of the brain, in that it's part of magical thinking. It's a need for us to believe that there's something else out there that sort of breaks us free from the prison of a purely, because even if there are aliens out there, for instance, let's say there's intelligent life, that could mean immortality for us. Maybe they're an advanced society and they know how to make us immortal. Like they've already mastered. They live to be, let's say, 100,000 years because of their technology and medicine, et cetera, et cetera. So maybe they could provide us with immortality. So, it kind of crosses over. I'm sure that, you and things that, get other guests you've had on your show profess a very different mindset, and probably believe, from what little I do know about your show, that you do believe that we've had visitations and all of the above. I'm going to be contradictory in that regard and suggest that that's wishful thinking. That's
Exactly.
part of our need to believe that there's something else out there, because otherwise we're just left with ourselves and we're just ashes to ashes, dust to dust. And it's a very sad story with a very sad ending, and no one wants to have to face it.
It sounds like we're a species that needs to believe that we're not alone, that we need the connection. But I agree with you 100% on your analysis when it comes to the extraterrestrial existence. Like you said, I've had hundreds of different guests talk about ETs, UFOs, and for some reason, they all believe that ET will be some sort of humanoid, that he will or she will stand up straight, he will have arms and legs. And my question to them, including many scientists we've had on, is, well, we are carbon-based units, but who says that life out there, if it does exist, is carbon-based? What happens if it's a species that is based on any other elements out there?
Sure.
And this perplexes them. They say, well, how can that be?
Right. Well, part of the instinct I think that we have is to anthropomorphize, to project our humanity onto our beliefs. Look at the gods of every religion. They're humans.
Right.
They're humans with wings, or who breathe fire or fly or sit on a throne in the sky. They're humans. All of our gods are humans. The demons are not. Every culture also has demons, which are sort of, deformed humans with horns and scales. But for the most part, we anthropomorphize. So we do it to our aliens, we do it to our gods, etc.
It seems that we're a binary existence, that that it's zeros and ones relate to good, bad, in, out, right, left. If you have a positive, you have to have a negative. It seems that when you cut through the crust of the matter, that we're a very simple species, that we ourselves complicate things, and it's our inability to accept the facts that create this illusion of extraterrestrials, angels, gods, and so on.
I agree.
Yeah. So let me ask you, Matthew, how do you see the human race or humanity evolving in the future? Have we stopped evolving, or will we continue to evolve?
Okay. Also, an excellent question that I touch on in my book. So again, as I've sort of mentioned, I believe that our possession of these parts of our brain that compel us to see reality this way were birthed out of the fear of death, of our awareness of death.
Right.
So I have chapters in the book dedicated to why did we evolve this? And basically I say, so awareness of death, what makes us unique, which made us the first species to be aware of our own deaths, is we possess parts of our brain that enable us the capacity for self-conscious awareness. We're the only self-consciously aware organism. If you take chimps and put them in a cage with a mirror on one wall, for the first 4 days, they will act antagonistically towards their own reflection, but they can learn with time that it is their reflection. They're the only other animal that can even recognize their own reflection. But essentially, so what happened was humans became the first self-conscious organism. And the reason we evolved self-conscious awareness was because it provided us with an advantage that made us the most powerful species on Earth. Because basically it provided us with the capacity for self-modification. Because once humans evolved the capacity to say, I am, let's say it gets cold out, we get hit with another ice age. Unlike every other species on Earth that's going to have to wait millions of years to evolve a thicker coat of fur or a thicker layer of fat, humans can say, I am cold. And within an hour, we can sew ourselves a coat. So because of self-conscious awareness, we possess the capacity for self-modification. We can alter our environment at will. If we deem that it would be advantageous to fly, we're not sitting back waiting 10 million years to grow wings. We'll build them. So because of our brain power, we can basically now adapt to any environment, whereas every other species has to wait for natural selection to take place for it to adapt to a change in its environment. So I believe because of this capacity to adapt to any environment, to modify ourselves to meet any environment. I mean, at this point, we can travel even off the planet. We can go to the moon. So there's no environment we can't tackle. As a result, I believe basically we're done evolving. We've transcended the process of natural selection. So if we get hit with another ice age, it's not like suddenly, we're going to get a thicker coat of fur. I remember being a kid and reading comic books and, it was like man in the future. And there'd be images of like some sort of green humanoid with a giant head with veins on it, depicting like how big our brains have grown. Our brains aren't going to grow. We're just going to build computers. Computers are the new brain. So our brains aren't going to grow. Our capacity to create technologies that will be even more intelligent than we are will come to place. But again, we're never going to be an alien creature with a giant veiny head with 5 times the brain power. We don't need it. We have enough brain power right now to make a synthetic brain that will do the thinking for us. And we're seeing it. It's happening before our eyes. Like we live in the first generation in just the last couple of years where this is now a reality. And now there's the debate of like, did we just screw ourselves? Did we just create the matrix?
Yeah, exactly. And that's no, I can give you a perfect example about that. And one of the many that are out there, what happened recently with the Writers Guild of America, they went on strike because they're afraid that artificial intelligence is going to replace writers and screenwriters and so on and so forth. As always, Matthew, I sincerely appreciate your time being with us. I, for one, am very glad that you wrote your book, The God Part of the Brain, A Scientific Interpretation of Human Spirituality. We need to look at both sides of the coin. We just can't be a society that says this is white, this is black. There has to be gray, because it's with the gray that we proceed and evolve as a species. And thank you so much for being with us tonight.
Thanks for having me on.
What are your final thoughts? What would you like to share with the Exo Nation tonight before we say goodnight?
I don't know. I have no lasting wisdom. I'm not one of the prophets.
Yeah.
Be kind to thy neighbor.
Oh, gosh.
And thyself.
To thine own self be true, right?
And that too.
I'd love to have the pleasure of having you back on the show again, because, I found this to be a great hour. So thank you so much. Continued success.
You just let me know. Have your producer send me an email.
Matthew, thank you so much. Take care of yourself. And once again, Exo Nation, our guest this hour has been Matthew Alper. He is the author of The God Part of the Brain, A Scientific Interpretation of Human Spirituality. Before we say so long, Matthew, where can they get a copy of your book?
You can go to Amazon.com, BarnesandNoble.com. And if you want to learn a little bit more, you can go to www.godpart.com.
Matthew, I'm sure many listeners will, and thank you for all your hard work and dedication in trying to put some sense into what is going on around us each and every moment of our life. Thank you very much, sir.
Thanks, Rob. Really, thank you.
Good night. Exonation, my guest this hour has been Matthew Alper. Once again, he is the author of The God Part of the Brain, a scientific interpretation of human spirituality. His website is godpart.com, and his book is available, as Matthew just said moments ago, at Amazon.com, Barnes & Noble, and all fine bookstores everywhere. I'll be back on the other side of the news at 6.5 minutes past the top of the hour as we continue here in the X Zone with yours truly, Rob McConnell, from our broadcast center and studios in St. Catharines, Ontario, Canada.